Hi, I'm Lynette Charlo, and this is
Kristen Mott from Lawrence Elementary.
Yes, and we are here to do the overview for third grade, modules 6 and 7, to wrap up this school year, to just give you some of those helpful hints and things to think about as you plan for the remainder of your year's math instruction. So the first thing we want to note is, in order to follow the process of what we are doing, you'll want to have your learning progressions handy as well as your modules 6 and 7. So if you currently don't have that, you may want to pause this video, grab those resources so you can make note.
Yeah.
Okay.
So now we're going to take a look. We're going to first look at module 6, and then we'll jump into module 7 after that. So
Okay. Yeah, we're going to talk about the progressions first, because it's vitally important that we have the bigger picture understanding of what those expectations are before we look at how our resource helps to support us in helping to accomplish that expectation. So if you will grab your progressions, and specifically for module 6, you're going to want the progression called measurement and data. Categorical data is part of this reference there. Once you've gotten that, we're going to take a look at some of the key points they say in the overview, because I think one of the things, being third grade, in the middle of all of that elementary, where do we fall in the structure of order of what's expected? What should they have come in knowing? Where's what we're teaching them, taking them? And overview gives us that bigger view. And so some of the key things, if you will, are following along with me on the very first part of the overview, because it doesn't have a page number. Page 2, it is referring to that there are two different types of data. There is categorical data and there is measurement data. And I don't know if you've ever reflected upon what all those different ways to display data are supposed to be representing, but it is very specific here in helping us recognize that, like, your categorical data would be data displays like your bar graph and your pictograph, whereas your measurement data is more along the lines of your line plot, also referred to dot plot. Similar in meaning, which is also referenced in your progression, that you could hear it referenced as either one of those, and what their intent and purpose is. But the fact that they have a specific intent and purpose in their communication of their mathematics, which is a real important thing to note. The other piece, if you'll look on page 3, they make a reference to a symbol that I gotta say I don't see a lot of, but recognize the importance of our students, so if they ever see it or ever need to use it. But it is called
axis break.
Thank you. It's like it's an axis. It's called an axis break. And the reason for that is, whenever you are displaying data, it is important to recognize it in something that you're looking at, or make certain it happens when you're creating it, that your intervals, the space between, matches an equivalent scaled representation. So whether your scale is by 1, that every line in a bar graph, let's say, represents a value of just 1, or is it scaled to every line as representing 5 of something, but that they are equal in value and equal in their representation as they are marked in their intervals, etc. So when you have an axis break, it is recognizing the fact that there may be a lot of intervals that have no data to represent, but in order to represent an equal value in your data display, you will show that there's a break between 0 and that number or that value in the process. So I found that really interesting on page 3. And they also reference on page 3 the importance of using tools like grid paper to help our students in support of recognizing that I have to represent interval distribution in an equitable manner, so that it will accurately display the data that we're trying to record and communicate.
And they said that grid paper also helps them, like, just to be able to visually discriminate that space and be able to tell that proportion and make sure it's equal too. So it's a good scaffold for kids also.
Yeah, and we did kind of notice the lessons do a nice job of setting it up with that and trying to wean them off of that. But recognizing your progression goes, that's pretty important, and that is something that you want to be cognizant of as you are instructing. We especially liked the table on page 4 of this progression because it did such a nice job of saying where each grade level fell in the sequence of responsibility of understanding things regarding data. And so in the area of categorical data, your standards at 3rd grade, you kind of were wrapping that up. And then when it came to the measurement data, you are right at the beginning stages. 2nd grade does some setting the stage here with some things that they reference regarding linear measurement and the use of the number line. But 3rd grade takes it to the step of now that fraction knowledge that you guys have been probably currently working on, but the modules previous to this are now making a connection in here as well. And that's why your data has weighted, because you have a fraction relationship in what you're recording. So they're part of the measurement data, but we thought that was really cool. When you look specifically to what it is saying 3rd grade's role is, if you look on page 7, this is giving some categorical data reference. So if you're ever having to create categorical data in your science or social studies with your students, it might be helpful to know that there's some key pieces in here, like your students really shouldn't feel that they have to record for anything that exceeds 6 data points, but they should be able to record and create data displays up to that point. And then
and you mean categories, right? Not data points.
Thank you. Categories. Yeah. Appreciate that for clarity. So just as far as the categories that they're recording, you don't need more than 6. 6 should be the max. And then the other piece that was really cool is making a connection to what we are doing in 3rd grade is kind of like that last line before we hit that middle school expectation of understanding bivariate data, categorical data, which means, and I love their example in here, it's like being on a cruise ship and you got a lot of people who are sick, and if you're doing the bivariate data, you are doing one data point that talks about people who are sick and people who are not sick, while you're doing another data point that says they ate the shellfish or they didn't eat the shellfish. So and then you're trying to see how many common points that you have in place there to see a cause and effect relationship. So, but that is something that's coming up in middle school, but it doesn't end with what we do in 3rd grade. It has much deeper connections that coming in the future. The other piece, though, is I thought, oh, is that all the 3rd grade? And the answer is no. If you go to page 10, then you're going to get the reference of information regarding our measurement data responsibilities in 3rd grade. And this is the part where creating rulers is going to be strong connection here, and then being able to record in line plot situations. So just making you aware that there are 2 places to look for the greater detail, and then seeing where things are going from there as well. And that would be progression things regarding
Module 6.
Module 6.
So now we'll jump into the actual module itself, and if you have that, if you'll turn to the overview page, and this is always a great place to start looking at the module itself, because it just really clarifies what the expectation is for students for each of the topics. And this one does have 2 topics. Topic A is going to be looking at that categorical data, so they're going to be taking a tape diagram and recording the data with the tape diagram, and then using that tape diagram and rotating it so that it's going to make the bar for the bar graph. And then they're also going to be using in topic A problem solving related to those graphs that they've made. So the equal groups, when they're making their bar graphs, they can be a value that's greater than 1, and they're going to be talking, like Lynette referenced, about scale for these graphs, because when they come in from 2nd grade, I don't believe they've done any work with scales that are different than 1. Like each picture in their graph is going to represent 1 of whatever unit they're counting. But now each picture in their pictograph, or if they're talking about a bar graph, each interval
yes.
on the graph could represent a different interval or a different amount. So one section moving up might be 2 of whatever unit it is they're counting, or 5. So this is the first time they're having to do that. When you jump into or continue turning forward to the terminology section. There's a little bit of terminology, not too much that's different, so make sure that you're looking at that. It's going to pull in frequent when you're having discussions about the line plot, looking at what data appears most frequently, and a few other words that are really important. If you're not familiar with the term scaled graphs, then that would be something that you want to kind of look back at. And that's just what I was referring to, how the graph is going to have a scale that might be different than just one for each interval going up on the graph.
And I know this isn't just an ELL issue, but you were using the term in math scale back when we were weighing items as well. And so there may be some confusion that we're using the same word to mean something very different, and may have to emphasize some time in helping them relate to the similarities and differences of the way that word is being used.
Yeah.
So that they're not going, what? I don't see that out here. There are no gram weights, you know, those kinds of things. So keep in mind your vocabulary may have to have some lingering emphasis.
Yeah, that's a good point. Thank you. And then down in the tools, it's all pretty much standard tools that you already have, and we'll kind of look more at specific lessons here in a minute. But I did want to note, if you go to the last page of the module overview, there's a little note that could be confusing on the very last page, and it says, it's talking about because the module is short, there's no mid-module assessment. But then it goes on, and it says, if you're not able to get the pacing, then be aware that one of the standards is a pre-test standard and the other standard is a post-test standard. And it's just talking about with the New York State test, because that's the curriculum we're using. So that is not going to be a statement that applies to you. So don't worry about that last statement at the end of the overview. Now let's jump into topic A, so looking at categorical data. Just a few notes for specific lessons. In lesson 1, this is a great place where you can vary the lesson just a little bit. The content and the strategy and all the papers could stay the same. What you're going to be doing in here is generating data. And so the lesson has you taking a look at favorite color. And I'm sure you've done this more than once, and your students have done it more than once, thinking about favorite color. So it's a really easy place to make a quick change to a lesson. It could just be as simple as just changing what their favorite is. But taking a look at different topics that might interest your students, because they're going to be thinking about what their favorite whatever is. So this is a great place that you can just switch that up quickly and just appeal to their interests. And kids love data, so, and especially if it's about them. So it's
definitely
a great place to make that change.
And it's an easy thing to collect when it's about them. So.
Yeah. In that lesson also, there's a good note on the last, where it's talking about the problem set, and it does mention that it might be appropriate to modify the assignment by specifying which problems students should work on first. Let the careful sequencing of the problem set guide the selection so that problems continue to be scaffolded, and balance word problems with other problem types to ensure a range of practice. And this is just always a good thing to think about as you're having students go through the problem set. If they're only finishing the first few problems, then those are probably not the word problems. And we want to make sure that they're hitting a range of those problems and hitting those word problems frequently.
Because just creating a data set or display is not all, it goes much deeper. You have to be able to answer questions and problem solve. So
yeah,
be selective to the pieces that will help get you to enough experience to balance both.
In lesson 1 also, they're going to be looking at or creating some graphs, and this is just one example here. And you can see at the bottom, that's where they're specifying what each picture represents. So they're looking at the scale of their graph, and it has you representing with hearts, but we thought this is a great place that you could easily make a change too. You could use different pictures, you could use different stickers, die cut things, whatever is convenient and is going to engage your students.
Because like a heart, not always easy for every student to draw, but it is an easy one to show 1 represents 2, or in half half of a heart represents one.
Yeah.
But it's hard to draw. So if you have stickers or a stamp or something along those lines, just to make it about the math and not about their ability to draw a heart.
Yeah, that's important. I have several kids who that would be difficult for. Looking now again a little further at topic B. When we go into topic B, we're looking at measurement data. And this is again a great place where you can switch things up. So one idea, when you have different things, there's going to be a lesson where you're going to be measuring straws.
And of course, we believe this is built so that no matter how much funds a district has, they could make this happen. And straws are something you can easily pick up from a fast food restaurant. So it's an inexpensive option to consider.
Yeah, and they're really easy to cut. What they have to do is you'll be cutting the straws beforehand to a certain length in half-inch, inch, and quarter-inch intervals. And then students will be using a ruler that they're going to make to measure that and then record data about the straws that they've used. And this might be the perfect thing that you want to use, and that's totally fine. I think it wouldn't be hard to use at all, and they're easy to cut. But if you want to change it up a little bit, add some excitement, you could really, not too difficultly, create some other tools to use. These were some things that Debbie had used previously, and so she had just taken a clip art of a specific object, attached this lovely mouse to a length of yarn, and then the lengths of the yarn varied. So one might have a super long tail.
You would pick the long one for this.
I know,
yeah.
And then one might have a really short tail, imagine. So, and then there were other objects as well, like telephones with a length of the cord that varies, or even things like caterpillars, where you might have one really long one and then one that was a little bit shorter. So those are things that wouldn't be too hard to just grab a clip art, change the size on the clip art, and then print off a whole bunch. And then they have different things that they can measure, different than just straws. But again, straws are great, and they're easy.
And they generate the same kinds of questions you want students to answer, because the reality is not just can they slap it up against a ruler and measure accurately, it's the conversation. So Debbie was pointing out when she was using the ones that she had created, that they were answering questions by comparing and contrasting the answers and justifying how it was that they measured it, and what level of accuracy they might need to consider, why theirs might be a little bit different. Your measurement's supposed to be to the nearest quarter inch, and so there are a lot of things that have to be considered, and so it just kind of generates a way to have those conversations. Was this lesson also the one you guys were referring to that in a previous module we're saying, hey, this lesson, if you don't have time, you could skip over doing?
In our video from Module 5, we had mentioned the very last lesson of that module is one where the students were taking a piece of notebook paper, and I don't know if that's zooming in very well, but they have a piece of notebook paper and then they're diagonally placing a paper strip, and they're using those lines on the notebook paper to create a ruler by first dividing it into inch segments and then partitioning those into halves and then into quarters to create this ruler that they've made. And within the context of that, with that module with fractions, it wasn't given the biggest bang for your buck in that particular module, but if you did choose to do it, then it will give your students some previous understanding for this lesson that might be beneficial. If you didn't choose to do it, the lesson goes step by step for how the students are going to create that ruler. So either way, it'll be just fine. And they're going to be creating this ruler, and then they're measuring straws or whatever you have used, and then collecting data that then you're going to have discussions about and create your graphs from. And then as we continued through topic B, looking a little bit later into, at the end of lesson 5, the template is shrunk a little bit. It just looks weird.
We don't know what happened.
And I don't know why it printed like that, but the template is a template of lined paper. So I think we're okay. If you need a larger one, you can pull one offline and print one, or you can just use lined paper. So either way.
Notebook paper.
Yeah.
Okay.
Lesson 6 is interpreting from line plots. So we noted that there were a lot of good places in there to have some classroom discussion and pull out those math practices. During the lesson at the beginning, you're using line plots with fractions to display measurement data, and then at the end, the students are really having great group discussions where it had a good strategy of having each student use a different colored writing utensil, and then they're going to be creating true statements about the data using words like frequent or at least or more or less than. And then they're going to be using different colored pencils or whatever you have available, so that then there's accountability. Well, I can see that Bobby didn't choose to write anything, or that they didn't participate. But that's just kind of a neat management thing they threw in there. But the discussion that kids will have is going to be really good because they're all going to be accountable for participating. It provides scaffolds for language that you might want to use, like sentence starters, and then it has a really clear explanation of what the students are supposed to do in their groups, and then they kind of do a gallery walk of these statements that other students have created. So it's a really great place to have discussion and have students working on those math practices as well. Going on through topic B, the formative task is one of the next things that a little bit later pops up, and it's Grandma's Gifts.
Yes.
And during that one, it doesn't connect directly with the standards for this module, but we know the expectation is high with word problems for third grade students. And so they're going to be looking at 3 different problems, word problems, and they have to create 2 different equations they could use to solve the problem, and then they're going to choose one of those to solve it. Using those thinking tools, justifying their reasoning, and just like with the other formative tasks, you're going to have the students work on it for one day, then you're going to go through, look at it, pick your favorite one that was correct answer, one that you liked really well that was wrong, and then the next day you're going to come back and have that rich discussion where students are going through and explaining why they chose to record their response that way, and just really working on those classroom discussion pieces that are really going to help students be able to think critically when they're solving problems, which is one of the main things we want to work on.
Yes.
So did you want to add anything else about that formative task?
No, I just think because it's just kind of at this point in time, it is, do they own this? Are they walking away comfortable with it? This is not one of those, see where else we need to go. So if you're finding there's still struggle, this could be an intervention consideration, more practice, more time to discuss. That favorite no or favorite wrong answer process is a kind of one of those growth mindset pieces that have been kind of shared, that it's just a comfortable place to make a mistake, because that's an opportunity to grow and learn. So
yeah. This module does not have a mid-module assessment, but then at the end of module assessment, that's always something you want to look at before you're starting to teach.
In fact, we suggest you take it, because there's the difference between, oh yeah, look, notice that, and ooh, they're asking them this way.
Yeah.
How would I respond before you ever start your instruction? It helps to influence that. So.
One of the things that we noticed as we were going through, and this is on the first page of that end of module assessment, is that students are having to take scaled data. So you can see here that one of these trees represents 4 trees in this picture graph. And then they're taking that data to then create a scaled bar graph. So that's something that you'll want to make sure that you're really explicitly teaching and guiding students with during instruction. And then as you go through the other pieces of the assessment, just thinking about, okay, I know they're going to ask them this in this way. How can I help students as I go through my instruction so that they're going to be successful, mastering these standards? And that's what's going to be measured on our end of module assessment.
That's true. And I was noticing, because of a vision I'm seeing here, that there was an example to help make that interval scale point that we kind of referred to earlier, because I'm seeing it's coming up in the assessment as well. The example that you are seeing here, I wanted to just point out that notice that the intervals between each number noted is fairly equitable in its value. and that the numbers that are representing each of those marks are equal in value from one another. Even though there's no data point for, I can't read this, 3.5. It's like if I'm reading it correctly here. There's no data point for it. Doesn't mean we skip writing it down, because all of those intervals need to be, in this case, 1/4 of a value from one another. So that would just be part of that key pieces to recognize that are important in the way we communicate using graphs.
And then the last thing we wanted to just show you, and you can pause the video if you feel like it's something you want to record, was just where the templates are in this module. There are quite a few, and the templates, you'll notice there are a handful that are listed as Fluency templates. And the Fluency templates, as I was looking through each of the lessons, they are ones that you're going to use during one of the fluency activities, so at the beginning of the lesson. And most of those Fluency templates are ones that just the teacher would need a copy of. But if you'll look specifically at the lesson, it's going to tell you, as usual, you know, this is just for the teacher or all students or pairs of students. But I did want to note that, because I hadn't seen any Fluency templates before this module. So feel free to use that if it's helpful for you.
Yes, just thanks for the heads up on helping us recognize there might be some things within the lessons to plan ahead for, which is always important to do when you're doing module unit planning. So
yeah.
All right.
I think we're ready for Module 7 now.
Okay. Well, Module 7, there's just a few lessons incorporated into that. We did not by any means use all of the lessons that were offered by Engage New York. So if you will, though, first of all, let's reference the progression. You'll want to look at your geometry progression this time, because that was the focus of the lessons for this particular module that we have organized for you. And so in the overview, it'll kind of give you a sense of just where things fall in line in the sequence and way of understanding geometry and geometric shapes. And the focus for these lessons has to do with just two-dimensional shapes. And but it kind of is pointing out that from kindergarten, our students have been having to recognize similarities and differences and properties and attributes and things that help them to know why a shape is called what it is called. But by the time we get to 3rd grade, and if you'll find your 3rd grade reference on page 13, you will see that quadrilaterals is a very big deal in 3rd grade. So knowing all of the different types of quadrilaterals, which ones and how they relate to one another, what kinds of attributes we're referring to, they're emphasized within this lesson. And there are some tools and things that I know that Kristen's going to highlight that you get support within using your Engage New York.
Yeah. So then when we go into the overview, did you want to talk about this?
That's true. In the overview, all we did is we referenced the lessons 4, 5, 6, 8, and 9, and which means we didn't use anything from topic A, and you will see all lessons then. And there are several that follow 9 if you were to download this from the New York site, but the only ones that we have sent you are from those particular ones, focusing only on plane shapes.
And so,
oh yeah, I know what else I needed to tell them.
Okay.
When you're reading the overview, it is also referencing the fact that this is where the Engage New York folks put perimeter. And because whenever the decisions were being made in reference to perimeter, where do we place that, we kind of recognized that time was not our friend, and the perimeter lessons kind of fell through the cracks. And we had previously mentioned in
Module 4.
Thank you. In Module 4, that you would want to try and make some intentional connections to the distance around shapes while you're talking about the area inside of it. For next year, we have been more purposeful about making certain some of these perimeter lessons then will be a part of it. But for this year, that was how it was that we had handled that, and I just wanted to let you know, taking ownership, we've learned from it, we will build. But for this year, let's kind of just talk about the lessons that we have left.
Yeah. So in topic B, which is what's included, lessons from topic B, it's going to go through looking at quadrilaterals, and it's going to be expanding students' understanding of quadrilaterals and being able to classify shapes based on their attributes. So in the overview, if you continue on, there is some new terminology. It has quite a lengthy list of terminology if you include the familiar terms, and some of those may be familiar, but then
some of them aren't necessary.
Yeah.
So some of them that are listed here are for the whole module, but we aren't using the perimeter and the area part, and we're not using any tessellating or tetronymos. And so just look to the lesson specifically for which of the terminologies that will come to light.
Yeah. But you may want to, since students, we really want them to understand these attributes of these shapes, it may be something that you want students recording these vocabulary words, having, if we have vocab cards, the district vocab cards for them, it'd be really recommended to pull those cards out, have them displayed so that students can reference those. Looking at the tools then, it has mostly familiar tools, but we wanted to just point out a few ones that might be helpful.
Well, within the district, we have had what are called power polygons that have been distributed to 4th and 5th grade classrooms in the past, that if you're going, I could really use some more shapes for my students to discuss, you could come across and ask those teachers if you could use them for this instruction, because you will see that there's some similarities to the pattern blocks going this way. There we go. In them, but there are differences in size, there's some differences in shapes, and it just gives another set of unique.
Yeah. And students, the pieces that are referenced here in your lessons, we do like the actual shapes that they chose to include. It has a variety of shapes, and some of them appear a little bit irregular or just not ones that you would typically notice. So especially looking a little bit into maybe lesson 5, I believe it is. But so those are just some things from the overview we wanted to point out. So now we'll take a look more into the actual individual lessons. So looking at lesson 4, we wanted to point out that they reference a right angle tool, and in lesson 4 they say each student should have an index card, and they'll use that as their right angle tool. And then later in lesson 5 it just calls it a right angle tool. So just to be aware that that's something you can have kids pull out. You could use different tools. Obviously, if you have square inch tiles or other tools handy that you feel like would be more beneficial for your students, feel free to switch that up if you need to. But that's what that right angle tool is. Looking at lesson 5, this lesson is going to be classifying and comparing other polygons. And so we wanted to bring back to your mind a familiar tool, which is the polygon family tree, that has been a part of many district trainings. It was an additional lesson, I believe, in some other previous years.
Yes.
And so this would be a great thing that you could use during intervention or as an additional support for students that might need it. But we know the power of being able to classify those shapes, bringing them down to the most precise definition. And so if you are interested in that, if you'll just email us, then it is on the portal, but we'll let you know it's easier just to email the link than it is to describe it. So
either way, I mean, we're happy to share, but you can search there if you wish,
Yeah.
or just let me know.
Yeah. And then if you continue on looking more at lesson 8, in lesson 8 you're going to be using tangrams, and so students are actually going to be making them, and we wanted to point out that it is really important that they actually construct the tangrams in lesson 8. So it'd be recommended to make the photo, or just have regular paper that they're doing this with for that lesson, because they're going to be folding and cutting, and it's going to be easier if they have just regular plain paper. Then in lesson 9 they're going to be pulling tangrams back out. So it would probably be beneficial for you to either make a copy on cardstock that's cut out for lesson 9, that's going to be easier to use because they're going to be using it in lesson 9 to then create other shapes using those tangram pieces. So it might be easier to have something that's going to be a little more durable for lesson 9. You could use cardstock. You could use, if you have plastic pieces of Tangram pieces, if you have the...
It's true. Some people are going, what? Did we ever use these for? They've been around a long time, but we haven't had any specific lessons that have noted Tangrams specifically until now. And so there's that, and then, like at the PTR, they have a die cut that's specifically for the Tangram shapes, so that you wouldn't have to, be precise in the cutting.
That's good to know.
Yeah, that is good to know. But the other piece is on the National Library of Virtual Manipulatives, if you're wanting to demonstrate or have students interact with that, with the technology.
Yeah, so there's lots of different options for what you could do for that lesson 9 part. Lesson 8, we really feel like they need to be creating it. Using regular paper would be our recommendation. And then for lesson 9, all sorts of ways that they could have these tools in their hands to then create these different shapes. So those were the most important notes from specific lessons. And then this module does not have either a mid-module or an end-of-module assessment. And so where you're going to collect your data is going to be from those journal pages, from exit slips. If you would like to create an assessment, you can. But most likely you're going to be pulling those data points from journal and exit slips. So just so that you're aware. And then the last piece we wanted to point out again were those templates. This module does not have as many templates, but there were a few, no fluency ones, but just a few that you will need to consider. So if that's helpful for you to have that, we wanted to just put that out there. Did you have any other notes for this
I think on
module?
I think that pretty much will be a nice way to wrap up the school year with some hands-on conversations and ways to interact with the map. And we wish you a good year wrapping it all up. So
Yeah.
thank you.
Thanks very much.